Namaste, everybody. Namaskaram. Good evening to all our viewers in Israel, India, and Europe, and good afternoon to all our viewers in American continent. Thank you for joining us. The Indian Jewish Heritage Center, together with the Cochin Jewish Heritage Center in Nevatim, are very happy to host for our 99th talk in our Heritage on Zoom program, the poet Zilka Joseph, for a talk on her poems, Bird of Sea and Fish of the Air. Before we start, for today's talk, I'm very happy to share with you that our dear friend and one of the pillars of the Indian Jewish community in Israel received the prestigious Pravasi Bharatya Saman Award. And I'm talking about this award, Indian award, that was given, of course, to Rina Pushkarna. It is the highest Indian award for a non-Indian resident and overseas citizens of India. And this year's award will be given to Rina by the President and the Prime Ministers of India in a convention that will be held just in a few days in Indore, Madhya Pradesh in India. And we are very proud and very happy for this great honor to a well-deserved person. I will also congratulate Vinod, Rina's husband, that is always next to her, and together they're an amazing couple who contribute and always here for the community to help in any way that they can. And Mazal Tov to Rina and Vinod. This is an article that was published about the award that she received. So we are very happy for today to host Zilka Joseph. Zilka was born in Mumbai. She grew up in Kolkata, and today she lives in Ann Arbor in Michigan, the USA. She is a poet and an educator, and she works and her work is influenced by the Bnei Israel roots and Indian and Western cultures. She has been nominated for several awards for every book she wrote, and the list is very long, so I will not read the list for you, but she will mention some of them in her talk. She's been featured on Michigan radio and podcasts. She worked and published and appears in several magazines and publications, and her works were published. She teaches creative writing workshops and is a freelance editor and manuscript advisor. Zilka, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be doing this talk for the Indian Jewish Heritage Center and the Cochin Heritage Center. It's a real honor to me to be able to share my story, my books, my work, and to read some of my poems for you this afternoon. I want to especially thank Avner for being so kind and for arranging this talk for me. As Avner's already told you, I was born in Bombay, and then I lived in Calcutta, where I was educated, and where I was a teacher for many years before moving to the US with my husband in 1997. I've always been a teacher, and I continue to be one. I wrote poetry as a child and as a young woman, and in college had some work published. But it was only in around 2000 that I seriously began to write and get published. And I had some of my earliest work in journals, as well as I had two of my earliest chapbooks were published. I will show you the covers of them as we proceed. And so what I'd like to do, and this is, Avner had very kindly advised me yesterday to also share some information about my family, as this is, after all, a Jewish heritage talk. I will give you two brief readings about this. So I'll talk a little bit about my parents first, and then about my grandparents. So my father, Solomon Aaron Joseph, was an apprentice at the Mazagon Docks, Bombay. He was trained on the SS Dufferin, became a marine engineer, sailed with Scindia Steam Navigation, and later was posted as marine superintendent in Kolkata, where he retired after 40 years in Scindia. Recently, he was posthumously awarded a plaque to commemorate his work with Scindia's. My mother's name was Ruby Benjamin, and my parents were together for 62 years. The photograph you see there is her engagement photograph, and the photograph that is posted right now is their wedding picture that was taken in 1950. My mother passed away in 2012, my father in 2014. I have a brother and a sister who live in India. And these are my parents. The photograph was taken by a friend in 2000, the year they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Unfortunately, I don't have too many photographs and I couldn't find enough to share with you today. So I would love to honor my parents today by dedicating my talk to them and to my dearest husband, John Joseph, who has stood behind me and by me in everything I have done. We are partners for life. I will now give you a little introduction to my grandparents. My father's mother was Hannah Israel, and her father, Jacob Bapuji Israel, was the magistrate of Aundh. Hannah was the eldest child, and her mother died in childbirth. Her father remarried, and she had 9 half-brothers and sisters. My grandmother and her sisters were educated at Huzurpara, which is a name that will be familiar to some of you, as perhaps some of your grandparents and ancestors might have attended that school. Her siblings made significant contributions in the world of publishing and editing, Judaic studies, professorships, teaching, research, and medicine. My father's father was Dr. Aaron Joseph. He enrolled in the British Army and went to serve in Palestine and Egypt during World War I. He died soon after he returned from the war at the age of 33. My grandmother, Hannah, brought up 3 young sons in Bombay with the help of her siblings and a small pension that the government gave her. Aaron's family lived in Ahmedabad, and from what little I know about them, his father and uncles had been doctors too. Coming now to my mother's family. On my mother's side, I know that her father, Ramim Benjamin, worked at the Port Trust in Karachi and lived there with his wife and his 4 daughters, my mother being the youngest. My mother and her family moved back to Bombay, from Karachi, shortly before Indian independence, 1947. Her sisters were highly educated and trained in Indian classical music, played instruments like sitar, sarangi, and the jaltarang. And from what I remember, one of my aunts had a master's degree in Sanskrit, one in mathematics, and a master's degree in a master's degree in education. And if I remember correctly, she actually traveled to the US and got her master's degree from the University of Wisconsin. My mother, it seems, was not sent to college, but began working at an early age. She was classically trained in Bharatanatyam and performed on stage. And that very briefly is a summary of some of the information I have about my parents and our family. Now, a little more about myself in order to provide more context for my work. I read some extracts from my essay in the Jewish Book Council's website, the section called Paper Brigade. They are an organization in New York that promotes Jewish writing and Jewish literature. As you already know, I was born in Mumbai and lived in Calcutta, India. I immigrated to the US with my husband when we were in our mid-30s, so it was a difficult time. My journeys, personal, geographical, spiritual, my hardships and triumphs influence my writing, sometimes in inexplicable ways. Exploring, searching, learning are in my psyche. The openness with which I was brought up enabled me to embrace history, languages, cultures, literatures, religions, philosophies, music, art, and make them my own. I devoured world epics, folk tales, literatures, mythology, and because India was colonized for 200 years by the British, I was influenced by their literature as well and by American culture, particularly music and film. And of course, I was impressed by our Indian writers who at that time had begun to make quite a name for themselves. I was still a very young girl at that time, but I would have to mention at this point the writing and poetry of Nissim Ezekiel, who is considered the founder really of Indian writing, Indian poetry in English. So I would like to pay tribute to him and to all the other poets such as Jeev Patel, Jayanta Mahapatra, Adil Jasawala, and Keki Daruwala, and many, many more. And of course, people like Rabindranath Tagore always permeate, I think, everybody's work in India. Animals, wildlife, fish, birds, nature play a significant role in my life. My larger-than-life father, Solomon, Sonny, Aaron Joseph, my quiet and wise mother, Ruby, had a great impact on me. Their deaths shook me deeply. I strive to bring my parents to life again in my poems, recreate a gamut of experiences, reflect a unique blend of cultures and ideas, trace my own growth, my many lives. My books have been nominated, as you know, and I continue to work hard to have my work seen and recognized. It's hard to get visibility sometimes when you're a poet, and particularly a poet of colors. So I'm very grateful that my books have been nominated for awards such as the Pushcart, the Penn Awards, the Griffith Awards, and many, many more. So what I would like to share with you is a list of my books and what they are about. I will be reading from 3 of them today, but there were 2 of them that came before that I will also show you the covers of in a little while. So my first chapbook, Lands I Live In, reflects my challenges as an immigrant in the US. My second, informed by science, mythology, and psychology, is called What Dread, and it focuses on the darker sides of animal and human nature. Sparrows and Dust, my third book, wrestles with memory and grief using bird images, Christian, Judaic, and Sufi philosophies. My first full-length book, Sharp Blue Search of Frame, grapples with death, loss, violence, women's struggles, and weaves in ideas from various religions, mythologies, and literature. Displacement and otherness, aspects of colonialism and racism, marginalization permeate and layer my work in complex ways. In my latest book, In Our Beautiful Bones, using hybrid forms, I examine these subjects as well as brutality against people of color, prejudice, oppression, and argue with the world and America where democracy fights for survival. So that, in short, is some information about my books and the varied subject matter of them. So Avner, if you could allow me to bring the camera back to me for a minute, I just would like to show my 2 earliest books. Thank you. So this is the book Lands I Live In. I know you might be seeing it as a mirror image, Lands I Live In. And this was the second, the next book that I wrote called What Dread. And the covers, I'm always in love with artwork and colors. So I just wanted to make sure you got to see where my life in writing actually began. And now, Avner, if you could show everyone the book that Sharp Blue Search of Flame, that would be nice. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So our lives themselves have been journeys, whether in moving from place to place, adopting new homes and new ways. And some of my work touches on all these aspects. So you'll witness them through the poems that I read today. And when I open a reading, I often choose a poem that has a central theme to my work. So I'm going to read two poems. The first of them is going to be from In Our Beautiful Bones, which I will be reading from later. But this poem is significant because I think it symbolizes really all our journeys, our quests. And it's called Voyage. The Upanishads explain how wisdom can be absorbed through sound, how the ear is a vessel, the receiver of divine messages. The lightning fell, and I only knew that it entered my eyes, and thunder repeated words in my ears I could not understand in the gray-blue light of evening. A sheet of silver drew itself like a shroud over my car, its engine and animal thrashing in the hold, my heartbeat like oars slamming hard against every climbing wave, my hands on the steering wheel, clawing it as if it were a raft. At 16, my father sailed the Bombay steamships, nearly deafened by their sound. Gales, ice, St. Elmo's fire striking on the high seas, then sailed diesel vessels through squalls when the sky was black and the water black and the sailors' hearts shrunk from fear, all listening on deck and on the bridge and in the bowels of the engine room to what the thunder said. And turning into a vacant lot on Updike near Pontiac, the storm washed me clean off the road. Wipers swept leaves and yellow-black sky into sea foam. I watched the windshield bulge like a goatskin. It strained but held. Then a dam of white light broke, the wall of water shattering its cargo, and me inside it like a seed, giving itself up to water and to wind. In the west, the sunlight crashing into the broken branches of oaks burned a tunnel of sienna through which the bow of my ship rose to meet the horizon. And my father, the chief, rode to his engineers, their faces streaked with oil and boiler suits sweat-drenched, men whose torn lips bled as another peal shook the flailing vessel, and we turned our faces to the upper deck. Like our Jewish ancestors wrecked on the Konkan coast thousands of years ago, we waited, but no calm came until the wind suddenly fell. My car almost shoved onto its side, now only swayed. A metal cradle spat from the mouth of thunder. I smelled its breath. Its teeth left bloodless marks on my skin. My bones shook, and though it was gone, I felt its pull. A lift, a nameless terror, and my deafened ears received every word it said, what it had said to my ancestors, what it had said to my father and to his men, as it had let the sailors go, as it had let my father go, and let us all go home. And the next poem that I often read at openings is called Bird in a Blizzard. I was very fortunate that at one time when I read this at a Zoom reading, Cécile Lomani, who is a French scholar, was online and heard me read this and asked me if she could translate it. And it was translated into French and she published it in the journal, a Paris journal, Apolé. So if you want more information, you can always email me. Bird in a Blizzard. This is when you know you should have stayed home. This is when you know this is not your element. When you know you have been blown way off course, that water changes its face every day, and the faces you love blur in that churning, that the whispers in the thick flood of flakes comes from elsewhere, that the ones who gave you shelter are gone, that the cracking of the spine of the frozen river will be the last sound you will hear, and the thump, thump, thump you hear in your head is someone trapped inside your heart. Yes, this is when you know your ancestors are wanderers, singing tunes you never knew you knew. You remember every word of the song, and the wind rips apart and flings, but how quickly your throat fills with snow. And when you turn again, you shiver as if you are wingless. You can move in only one direction now, deeper. All right, so I am now going to read poems from the book that is on the screen there, Sharp Blue Search of Flame. I was very fortunate that Wayne State University Press in Detroit took this manuscript and made this beautiful cover for me. The panel you see on top, you will probably recognize now, is the eyes of my mother from the photograph at her engagement. The book has a lot of beautiful artwork and a photograph, the same photograph that you see. There are many poems in this book that are dedicated to my mother or about my mother. So today, the reading that I will be doing, I'm choosing poems that have some autobiographical significance or some stylistic element that I feel would fit into today's reading. So I'm going to read a poem called The Bharatnatyam Dancer. As you know, I mentioned that my mother had been a dancer, and of course, in the very traditional Indian tradition, very often when women are married, their interests and their careers often take a backseat. So a lot of those things changed after she got married. And this poem is The Bharatnatyam Dancer. Imagine this. It's Shiva's Rudra Tandav my mother performs, frenzied dance of destruction, her lotus feet scorching the earth with flame. Not the great god's three wild locks or river Ganga bursting through matted curls, but her thick black rope of hair whipping the backs of her knees. Her sari pleats open and close, the pallo's silken sweep bound in a belt of gold. How thunderous her cold eyes, how pure the gestures of her ever-changing mudras. But where was your fury, oh my sweet mother? Where was your fury, mother? Nataraj, where was your protective flame? Did your three eyes freeze, unweeping, and deaf your holy ears to her, to the sounds of 100 brass ghungroos thrumming on her ankles? No, 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 you heard her feet, the bells, the beat of lightning feet. You heard her desire, you heard her steps, her dance shatter Mount Kailash. Your home, your God abode, your manly kingdom. You heard the audience roar and knew all along her father's will, that he would say to her no more. The tongue of every ankle bell ripped out, her heart a tomb, her art, her frame turned to cinders by you, you jealous, jealous Lord of Dance. And the next poem is also about my mother. I'm just going to try and read 2 or 3 short poems from each book, and then if there's more time at the end, I'll see if I can accommodate a few more. The poem I'm going to read now is called The Hands That Lit the Shabbat Lamps. In my home, we had the Star of David up above with the 2 containers for the oil lamps, which we later converted to little plates which could hold candles. And we all stood around it in the dining room, raised our hands and said our Shabbat prayer. And we all took turns in actually lighting the lamps. But in this poem, I'm portraying my mother as the lighter of those lamps, the hand that lit the Shabbat lamps. My mother's hands, what did they dream? Tough and weathered they are, heavy, thick, square, nail strong, did a lifetime of labor in a man's world, bore the weight of all our needs, the brunt of a mother-in-law's tongue, dad's quick temper. How hard those pale hands slaved, tinted with turmeric, smelling of garlic, cilantro, or cloves, cinnamon, butter on high holidays, and at night, Pond's cold cream. For special times, she wore nail polish for silk sari evenings or gold jewelry events, dad's official dinners for weddings. The rougher her fingers grew, the more she slid into her shell, hiding her true heart, just as her mother's had even before the fourth unwanted daughter, my mother, was born. When did her palms turn to steel, child given extra work, less education than her sisters, even less play? These hands, so old now, so brave, what did they dream? These hands that taught us how to light our Shabbat lamps. When did they have soft skin? How wise these hands, webbed with cracks, curling early to fit inside my father's palms. Now arms weak, heads bowed, they both stand by the door, reach to touch the mezuzah, say Shema, kiss each other on the lips, holding hands when they leave the house. She leads him, the half-blind head of the house, and takes one shaky step at a time. So those are the two poems that I want to read for you from Sharp Blue Search of Flame. And I will now proceed to read to you from my next book, Sparrows and Dust, which was published earlier last year. And the poems I'm going to read, I'm going to actually read three very short poems from this book. This book won a notable book award, so I was very pleased about that. So I thank Ridgeway Press and Emma Liebler who published this book. The first poem I'm going to read is Negative Capability. And as you can see that the title, Sparrows and Dust, talks about birds. So we're going to be talking a lot about different kinds of birds and metaphors with birds. And a lot of these poems have aspects of Sufism as well in them. Negative capability, you may remember from John Keats's theory of negative capability, where you actually observe and then become the sparrow that you observe, you become the sparrow. The wind has blown you here again, brought you to my deck. Oh, white-crowned sparrow, trill, 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 your striped head appeared from sunflower seeds, husks, moldy leaves that look like burned remains. Pick, pick, picking, scratch, scratch, scratching, clawed feet, kick high fast, glean gold. Rises from these soggy piles, cold Michigan is just waking. Clouds, thunder, so dreary, yet you return to feed, to revel the mess of rot and dirt, to chase house sparrows and juncos. How the cardinal, the red-winged blackbird, give you grief. Still, they cannot faze you. For a few days, O winged visitor, I will claim you, you who are like one who crosses back from another realm. What's left to know but the unknown? Arrival, departure, arrival, departure. Oh yes, a world can fall apart in an instant. See how flesh dissolves. Look, the wind whips my brown feathers. Hungry, I scrabble, pick. What remains then for us? Open sky, sun, so night comes, stars wheel, we spiral higher, become air. Is this the bird way? This book has also been influenced by Athar's Confluence, the confluence of birds, and I mentioned that in the acknowledgements in the book. The next poem I'm reading is called, let me just find it, so I have it in front of me. It's a fragment from a much longer poem, and this section is called Even the Hundreds of Swallows, Migrant Swallows and Hoopoes. Even the hundreds of migrant swallows and hoopoes who fell in thick clouds upon the decks of my father's lurching ship took shelter during storms, turbulent tropical crossings, talked with him in many tongues, and told him tales of many more worlds, my parents' destiny, uncharted ways, the wild child in my mother's dreams, now invisible hummingbirds buzz in my ear, oceans and oceans away. We're here, they say. You'll find us. Follow the birds. This poem is called Our Cup Runneth Over, and if many of you may do this, where we fill the cup with sharbat and let it flow over into the saucer on our Shabbat evenings. Our cup runneth over. Sometimes on Fridays you return. We set the table, light candles, say Shabbat Shalom, hug and kiss, fill tiny cups with raisin sharbat till the burgundy liquid spills into the saucers. We drink. The cool sweetness slakes our thirst, and later we sip fine scotch together. We argue and laugh loudly, just like we used to. Raise our voices, raise our glasses, roar, l'chaim. I will now read a poem or two from my most recent book, In Our Beautiful Bones. And yeah, thank you so much. That's a beautiful cover. I wanted to talk about every cover, but this one I must talk about in particular because the artwork that is portrayed here is from a wonderful Ben Israel artist who is quite famous. Many of you already know her, Siona Benjamin. I began to see her work online and I was very, very drawn to it. There are many themes that we feel are similar. And so then I wrote to her and I asked her to allow me to use this particular image from her painting Exodus. And also want to thank Judith Kerman, my editor, and the one who designs all these covers as well. So grateful thanks to both of you. I'm going to read a poem called The Rice Fields from this book. And this poem is very special to me because this is the poem that got published in a prominent poetry journal in the US, and it's called Poetry Magazine. And so I'm going to share this poem with you. It's called The Rice Fields. Miles of them grow in my carry-on and travel with me across continents. But the custom officers are suspicious. They eye my old suitcase and ask me to open it. Pickles, they say, sniffing deeply, prodding a packet or two. Say, sure, ma'am, you've got no jeera or chilies. Now they've learned the Hindi word for cumin. So the new trick is to joke with us. And one time I saw 3 burly officers question an elderly couple, disheveled as I was from 20 plus hours of travel and as disoriented. And yes, as usual, all the usual foreign suspects are sent along to agriculture. And they poked around in their overstuffed bags where some rice fields appeared, but they couldn't see them, of course. And one officer said, duck, Bombay duck. It's a fish, dried fish your son wanted. Sorry, no fish or birds allowed. The officer looked at each other again and again, expressions priceless. So another time I land at Detroit airport and I shake my head at the silver-haired officer, say, sir, no pickles, meat or cheese. I buy them here at Bombay Grocers and Patel's. Give them a sweet Colgate smile. Yes, sweets, yes, made of lentil. No dairy, no dairy. The red gold cardboard boxes of sweets he can see, but not the rice sprouting beneath, the young green shoots. No, our rice fields he will never see. We carry them wherever we go. So I'm going to read one more poem from this book. and then I will shift to a little different subject matter and then come back to a few of my poems. A lot of the poems in this book are fairly long, so even though there were many I wanted to choose for you here, particularly one poem called Her Story, where I do talk a little bit about my background, my grandmother and my grandfather, and kind of joke a little bit about how people get so surprised that there are Jews in India, and people in America are so surprised that there are Jews in India, and the story of the Ben Israel. So I joke a little bit about that. But the poem I'm going to read now is called Mama, Who'd Have Thought? And again, I chose this poem because of some of its autobiographical content, and also because it refers to current events. Mama, who'd have thought that after all these years in America, my love and I would finally have a place of our own? No, not a real house, but a condo beside a pond. Not a real pukur like the lakes in Bengal that Dad used to go to, fishing in but a man-made pond with a fountain where mallards and black ducks bring their broods of supercharged little ones, and where the pied grebe pops up in spring and fall, and the trumpeter swans I love so much visit too. Then the old regulars, a belted kingfisher and a couple of blue herons, fish here. Sometimes in deep summer, cormorants unfurl and sun their long wings to dry while still skimming the water. Dad would love this. Now you've come to see me, Ma. Let's go for a walk. Here, take my arm and let me guide you slowly down the bank. The pavements are smooth, not like those death traps in Kolkata. You're laughing, but careful. Here the ground is uneven and slopes sharply to the pond. You're right. That clump of grass is where the geese I told you about nested last year, the very same year we moved in. So sad. Oh, the neighbors are friendly. No, no one here is like us. Wait, let me show you the giant goldfish, how the big ones wriggle as the heron tries to swallow them. If it rains tonight, we'll surely see some shoals churning on the surface. And so funny, once when the kingfisher caught a fish that was too heavy, or maybe it was thrashing too hard, she must have dropped it. For days we wondered who left this dead goldfish on our patio, a sign from the spirit world that you live in now. We thought, and then you won't believe this, one afternoon we see an osprey. It hovered and plunged into the pond, emerged with a goldfish the size of a kitten in its talons, and it flashes right past the big picture window, not 2 feet from where my love and I watched, mouths hanging open. Yes, we took a photo, but it was all so sudden. It's all blurry. I'll show you when we go back in. It happened so fast. That gorgeous bird stayed for 2 weeks. I think it will return this fall. The red-tailed hawks and Cooper's hawks are always hunting around here. What? Are we safe? Yes. Yes and no. No, Ma, America is not safe. Sure, some policemen kill people who don't look like them. It's scary. White men march nowadays, shouting threats. They put children in cages at the border. Have they no hearts? Bad things could happen to us here too. But this is our home now, Ma. You didn't want us to leave. You wept for days. Forgive us. We could not bring you here then. Now your spirit is here. Protect us. Please stay. So those are my 2 poems that I want to read to you from this book. And if there's time, I'll see if I can go back a little bit. But now I have, many of you know how fond I am of food, how fond I am about reading about food, and also writing poems that are food related. Many of my books have food themes. But now I'm going to read a few poems that are dedicated really to food. So, and the reason I take great pleasure in reading reading these poems today is because I want to honor um, an absolute legend of Ben Israeli writers. Um, and in fact, I should have her book here. This is Esther David, and her most recent book is a collection of Indian Jewish recipes. So I want to sort of pay tribute to her today by reading these poems, and also in congratulations to Reena Pushkarna, whom I have heard a lot about and read about her restaurant in Israel. So what I would love to do is to read a couple of poems to you from a journal that I was recently published in April. Some of you may know the documentary High on the Hog, Satterfield's documentary. So he's a founder of Whetstone magazine. If you look it up, you'll see. And this journal is available there. It's one of their first print issues of this journal. And I was so fortunate to have 4 poems in this journal, all about Ben Israeli food and my memories. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from there. So the first poem I'm going to read is a pantum for Chikcha Halwa. And I haven't had a chance today to really talk about form and style very much, but I will talk a little bit. The pantum is a Malaysian form, and it's a repeating lines where lines repeat themselves, as you will see from this pattern. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Chikcha Halwa. If you are not, it is a kind of wheat halwa that Ben Israelis make for our festivals. Whose hands worked so hard to make this halwa? Whose hands soaked the mounds of wheat? How we waited 3 days and nights. How chick was extracted from grain. Whose hands soaked the mounds of wheat? Knew each step of the recipe. How to squeeze the chick from grain. To boil slowly the thick beads of juice. Did they learn each step of the recipe from a new culture, from a new land? To boil slowly the thick beads of juice. Did they miss loved ones left behind from a new culture, from a new land? Did they taste their ancestors' food? Did they miss loved ones left behind? Those lost in the deluge, shipwrecked? Did their tongues taste their ancestors' food? This was so different from sweets of home. Those lost in the deluge and wreck would never come back to life. So very different from sweets of home, sugar, coconut milk, colored pink thickening. Those lost in the deluge, shipwrecked, would their spirits whisper old recipes? Sugar, rose tinted, coconut milk thickening, tired arms, bated breath, silky cubes cooling. Do spirits whisper old recipes in a new land, new life, new history? Tired arms, bated breath, silky cubes cooling, sprinkled with poppy seed, slivered nuts, new land, new life, new history, food and ways you made your own, sprinkled with poppy seed, slivered nuts. How we waited, the food and ways you made your own, your hands working hard to make this halwa. And the second poem I'm going to read from this journal is called Never Forget the Chironje. Many of you will have food memories of this and perhaps make it. I really miss the ones that were made at home. I don't think I've eaten these for years. So it's a flaky sweet, and the poem describes the process of it being made. Not the usual savory fried puris, flat and round and large as the palm of your hand, the ones we might eat with rich mutton curry on birthdays or anniversaries, but the special ones, the high holiday ones, 7-layered ones, if you followed the rules, half moon shaped confections filled to the tightly pinched or zigzagged seam with key roasted semolina, coarse shredded coconut, chopped raisins and nuts, deep fried in our big karai, then laid out in steel thalis to cool, sprinkled with powdered sugar and the brown globes of fat charoli nuts. Who knew heaven could be like this? It was never enough to hang around my mother and grandmother while they worked, sweat beading their brows and tempers sharp. But it was my obsession to watch them like a hawk and wrap myself in the fragrance and to wait. They knew great secrets I would never learn. Oh, I remember the crunch when I bit into the first hot ones, the trial ones, the crooked ones, the broken ones, the split in oil ones, those that never made it to the table, my face nearly plastered to the plate. Tasting what they asked me to taste, telling them what was lacking, more sweet or salt, devouring every love-filled crumb they gave me, and me thinking they were immortal, that there would never be a time in our lives without them. Our sons are kush kushi karanje. Thank you. So that's a section, both poems are from Rasa. I would like to read one more food poem, which was published in 101 poems for the third millennium. It's edited by N.N. Carlson and Emmy Silverman. It's available everywhere. I thought I would read the poem that was published there because, again, Malida is something that is so precious to all of us. And all of us have had it at some point in life or other. All right, I found the poem. Sweet Malida. A mix of water, softened, flattened rice, sugar, dried fruits, and nuts. Was a dish made for Shabbat or for breaking fasts, for Elijah's festival. Cooling, light on the palate, and to the body and the spirit, it was welcome in the heat of day or night. We, like our Muslim, Christian, and Hindu neighbors and friends, had many foods in common, and we often celebrated together their festivals or ours. I relished particularly fresh coconut, the regional staple, its milk or its flesh added to almost every dish. But this was to me the best way to eat it, finely grated by my mother's hands, left unsweetened and sprinkled haphazardly on the malida, juicy threads with a fleck of stubborn brown kernel here and there, that sometimes crunched in your teeth like sand, and you winced and you swallowed it, knowing that there was no simpler or purer or truer form than that. And thank you so much for listening and being part of this. I'm coming to the end of my program. I'm going to just read one poem to round off this reading. And that is the poem that has the line that's in the title of my talk, Bird of the Sea and Fish of the Air. And as I read it, I want us to kind of think about all the people who have influenced our lives, all the places that have influenced us, and of course, the people we have lost and who are still so much part of our lives. And again, thank you to Avner, to Indian Jewish Heritage Center, Cochin Heritage Center. I hope that I can one day be in person, come in person and present at your schools and universities, both in India and in Israel. And a great big thank you to my husband, John, who is by my side and my rock. always. So I finish with a poem from Sharp Blue Search of Flame. All these books are available online. And if you go to the books page of my website, you'll see the book cover, links where to buy it, reviews. And if you scroll down, each book is presented there with all the information. So I end with Child of Churning Water. My salty songs sound no different than the gulls. My shadow hovers. I see my mouth opening and closing in air as if calling. No words but breath escapes my throat. I hear the murmur of ocean. Who shall I be now? Where can I perch? My woman heart is bird of the sea and fish of the air, blood and dirt, leaf and light, child of churning water. My feet are whales. I shall dive deep, turn to kelp and pearl. Tides speak history and planets read my palm. My breath is writ in water. See now, I am a leaf boat on the river Ganga, my clay lamp soul drifting on mist-hidden seas to shores only stars can know. Thank you so much. So happy you're here.
Thank you, Zilka, taking us for this beautiful journey of magical words and memories of your poems and our history, our heritage. It was beautiful. Wishing you all a very good and happy, wonderful year of 2023. That's it, guys. Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Zilka. It was amazing.